Okay, well, yesterday the Calgary Real Estate Board had their annual forecast where the economists employed by the board will provide their outlook as to how they think the Calgary real estate market will do for the next year. And so they've done that, and they've prepared a great report here. This is a really interesting year because Calgary has done quite well over the last 2.5 years. But the Bank of Canada has increased interest rates, which has kind of put a bit of a wet blanket across the whole Canadian real estate market. But what does that mean for Calgary, and what are the details about growth and expected sales and pricing and all of that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to dive into the report. I'm going to take you through each of the sections in there that the Calgary Real Estate Board has prepared. I'll share with you the relevant information from that I think you need to know if you're considering buying or selling or investing in Calgary real estate this year. And then I'll provide you my opinion on some of the analysis that they have performed as well. So let's go and dive into this. So here you can see we've got the forecast report. They've done a really nice job with this PDF. They've got all the sections laid out. It looks great this year. So for their summary, they've got this graph here, which I quite like. It basically shows how the last few years have been, and you can see here in 2021 and 2022 we had really fantastic sales numbers. Calgary returned to form after really the better part of half a decade of being in the doldrums here from 2015 through till 2020. Now we did start to gain some traction in 2020, the latter half of it, as we got our way back from the pandemic, and you can see how that carried through here into 2021 and 2022. So for this year, 2023, CREB is expecting prices to come down to 0% growth, or basically be stabilized. And then transaction volume, so the number of sales, that's expected to come down just a little bit from where we were last year, but still not back to the leaner years that Calgarians have gotten used to between 2015 and prior to the pandemic in 2020. So really not a bad news story for our market here. That's going to be very healthy and should keep realtors busy here and trades busy, and anybody that touches the real estate industry here this year. Now, some of the topics that they're talking about with respect to what will drive the numbers and these projections that they have. Well, lending rates is obviously a huge one. We've seen now it'll be 8 interest rate increases from the Bank of Canada over the last year or so. So a completely different interest rate environment, which we'll touch a little bit on in a minute here. And then some of the stuff like migration, so people that are moving to Alberta and Canada, and what are the employment prospects like inside our market here this year, and then also supply. So I think these are the top considerations for this, and CREB has done a really great job in flagging these and digging a little deeper, which I'm looking forward to showing you next. So they talk a little bit, about what the risk factors are here. And so what, interprovincial migrants can increase the market strength, and low supply will put more upward pressure on pricing too. In terms of downside risk elements, well, uncertainty related to the energy sector and environmental regulations and all of that. I mean, that exists on this sheet every year. Calgary's always had that as being a downside risk factor because we never know what's happening with respect to government regulations and the energy industry. So depending on what happens with oil and gas, that will affect the Calgary real estate market. And then inflation is the other one that they've flagged here. Will we see increased inflation lead to job reduction and just a higher cost of living? Will it slow down our economy here? That would be considered a downside risk. This is a really cool little graphic that they've done, and I've talked about this a lot. So coast to coast, how does Calgary compare and how does Alberta compare? And you can see here, Calgary's average price in 2022, $516,000 compared to $1.2 million in Toronto and $1.2 million in Vancouver. So less than half of what those major markets are. And I think that just paints a very strong picture for strength in the Alberta real estate market. I think we've got extremely low downside risk in our market in terms of prices dropping further, just because we're so affordable and we have such a long way to go to be close to the pricing levels of these other two markets here, nearly 3 times. It's just getting to be that extent or that level. So I really do think that if you're in Calgary or even Edmonton, where the price is under 400, it's a safe place to have your money in real estate right now. Now, inflation and lending interest rates. So this is a cool graph that they've got here from the Bank of Canada that shows inflation rates, which is this sort of dark blue line here, and then the Bank of Canada overnight interest rate. So, they're trying to slow down our economy a little bit by increasing that lending rate. That's going to be the story this year, is what are the impacts of those increases going to be on our real estate market. Now, this is a cool graph that is really relevant to demand for real estate here, and will Calgary and Alberta buck the trend that we're seeing in other real estate markets, where will we continue to see price growth despite these interest rate increases? And it's looking good for us to be in the game for that, because they're expecting, or in 2022 rather, we had 70,000 people move to Alberta from other provinces. And remember that number, 70,000, because it'll be relevant in a couple slides here. But they're coming from all over Canada. Now, it's important to note that this is interprovincial migration. It's not international migration. So these are people that are already established Canadians. They can get pre-approved and qualified for mortgages more easily than someone who has no credit history in Canada. They know their way around the country a little bit more. And so I would consider those types of migrants to be more qualified to and more likely to enter the real estate market than someone who has not got a footprint in Canada yet. So I think that's good news, and something to watch for. Those are big numbers coming from all over. Look, 18,000 from Ontario. That's certainly going to be a factor in our real estate market this year. So remember that, 70,000, because it'll matter here in a little bit. Now, employment. Obviously, why are all these people moving here? Well, they're moving here because our market is growing. We've had 7.67% in terms of employment growth in last year. So Alberta's coming back. We've got a good energy industry here. We've got lots of construction to meet all of the demand for real estate. We're attracting other industries to our province. We've got a good balance sheet here. So all of that stuff is what Albertans have typically sought after. This has been the story of our province, and now we're seeing that come to play here with good numbers, 7.67% for employment growth here in 2022. Now, for the 2023 forecast, it's much more modest. So we're expecting 1% employment growth, but still really healthy unemployment growth numbers, or unemployment numbers just under 6%. That certainly is pretty good. So you can see here Alberta's employment numbers in 2022, 5.1% versus the whole country being at 3.72. So we're a market leader in that respect. Now, we talked before about 70,000 people moving to Alberta. Well, this is important to know, because where are these people going to live? So when we look at Calgary housing starts, now this is the Calgary Real Estate Board, so we don't have stats for the whole province here in this particular presentation. But you can see here in 2022, we had 70,000 people move to Alberta, and only just under 18,000 new construction homes built in the Calgary market area. And so there's not enough housing being made to not only satisfy the existing demand, but for the demand that's increasing as a result of Canadians moving to Alberta from other provinces as they're getting priced out there. So this is going to mean only one thing: continued support for pricing in our real estate market here. If you've got people moving there, you've got more demand than you're creating supply. It's just going to mean prices are going to be supported even with these interest rates that have increased. I think that's a good sign for our market here, our market health in 2023. The resale market, so these are 2022's figures. These have been out for a little bit here now, but obviously we had a really great year in Calgary in 2022. Average price here in the low 500s. Sales have gone up year over year. We're at the peak sales volume now, more sales we've ever had in Calgary, which is great news. And then months of supply. So this is my favorite real estate statistic, which you can use at any time you're ever looking to gauge the strength of a real estate market. Look for this statistic, because it's generally accepted that if you've got less than 2.5 months worth of supply, you're considered to be in a seller's market. If you've got more than that, you're in a buyer's market. And so Calgary spent the majority of 2022 solidly in seller's market territory, and I think that's likely to continue to be the case here in 2023 as well. I guess we'll have to wait and see how we do with that. So looking at the different types of market segments. I'm not going to take you through all of these things. You can see in the report if you want. But the different areas in the city where they're seeing housing demand for detached stuff, these would only really be relevant if you were shopping in these specific areas. So feel free to get in touch if you want to know a little bit about that. But they cover this for semi-detached, for the row housing market, and apartment style as well. Now, this is something I just want to touch on because for the longest time, the condo market in Calgary was really not that healthy. But now we're starting to see sales are picking up over the last couple of years. Inventory is coming down and pricing is starting to appreciate. In 2022 saw an 8% price growth for apartment style condominiums year over year. And it was like more than half a decade here in Calgary that we were saying that other things, stay away from condos, they're going to be stagnant. Well, here you can see now that they're doing a lot better, which is a great sign for our real estate market. In addition to that, the report will cover off all of the satellite communities that make up the Calgary market region, apart from just Metro Calgary and the city proper here. Now, this is the one slide that I wanted to kind of finish up with in summary. And you can see here the forecast that they're providing. This is in the purple color here. So residential sales are expecting that to come down. Pricing, they're expecting the pricing to soften just a little bit, less than 1%, which is essentially no change at all. And we'll see how that kind of comes through. But you can see here the forecast board, so the Conference Board of Canada, RBC Economics. These are the underlying economic indicators that would drive CREB's assessment of where the Calgary real estate market will be this year. Are we creating jobs and GDP growth? Yes, we're expecting that to happen. Employment growth is going to be modest, but it's expected to be there. Our unemployment rate is actually set to drop. And if you look at where we were in 2020 and 2021, there's some pandemic effects in there, obviously, but we're solidly into mid-single digit territory here now, which is awesome news for our employment market. Net migration is going to be positive again, and if people are moving here, it's going to create more demand for housing, and that's going to show up in terms of a strength in our real estate market here, which I think is really good news. And so all that is there. Now here's the one that's the one to watch, which is the lending rate. So RBC Economics has indicated the average rate for interest rates and mortgages in 2022 is 2%. In 2023, the average rate will be 4.25%, so more than twice as expensive as it was last year. And what impact will that have on everything is really the big question mark here. But it looks as though CREB's answer to that is that it's going to basically stay where it is right now and not change a ton, and I would largely agree with that. So I'd love to hear what you guys think about this. I think CREB has done a fantastic job with their report here this year. I think Calgary will have a very stable year and will continue to be looked upon as one of the bright spots of the Canadian real estate market when perhaps the headlines won't be as rosy for some of the other markets that we'll see across the country. So thanks very much for watching this, guys. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thanks again, and we'll see you guys next video.